Hi guys, Monk Hotkeys guide video is here. Many of you have been asking about this. I haven't been in too much of a rush to make it because I wanted to have some experience with the monk to really get a good idea of what spells to use where. So yeah, I did put it together. For those of you who have seen my Knight or Paladin hotkeys guide, you may want to jump straight towards the end of the video where I showcase the hotkeys, because to start with, I'll talk about the same things I talked about in the Paladin and Knight videos. Anyway, let's get into it. First of all, my gaming mouse that I use is the Corsair Scimitar. I highly recommend you get a gaming mouse with at least 12 side buttons on it. That makes Tibia or any MMO just so much easier. So highly recommended. There's really not enough hotkeys on the keyboard alone to play Tibia effectively. This is my mouse. This is not the one you have to get. Of course, there are other alternatives as well. Second of all, I want to touch on WASD versus arrow keys. So this is the way you move in the game. Personally, I use WASD, and I also highly recommend that you do that. It's just way more efficient. Your hand on the keyboard is way closer to all the hotkeys that you have there, allows your second hand to be on the mouse very comfortably. Again, all my hotkeys are set up in such a way. So if you're not using WASD, this guide probably won't be that useful to you anyway. And finally, the usual separation of concerns concept I always talk about when talking about hotkeys. And this is actually a screenshot already from the Paladin hotkey guide. The idea is to separate different types of actions between different hands. So personally, I usually have offensive abilities and spells on my left hand, on the WASD hand. I have like offensive spells on like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have all the support and healing and potion spells on my right hand on the mouse. This allows me to combine the two without getting too confused, right? I don't like, for example, healing and using offensive abilities with one hand, because, for example, you get yourself trapped, you panic, it's very hard to be using one hand to do everything. So yeah, separation of concerns. Try to separate the offensive abilities from everything else. Of course, as you become better and better at it, you can mix it a little bit more as you get used to it. But the general principle that I use is trying to separate the offensive rotation from everything else. And you will see that as we talk about the hotkeys a little bit. And that's basically it. We can now jump into my hotkey setup. So this is my hotkey setup. First of all, this is going to be the left hand, the WASD hand. We also have a second section for the mouse, but we'll get to that. And yeah, obviously this is not, a golden source. You don't have to set it up like this. It's just to give you an idea. If you prefer to have your amulets and your rings on slightly different hotkeys, that is totally fine. And I will just mention that I am lacking team hunting spells in all of my hotkeys because I don't team hunt. So, I don't have like the CO, I don't have like the mentor over, stuff like this, right? If you will have to add those somewhere else if you're a team hunter. Some of the available hotkeys that I currently have is sort of like X, V, B, F4. You could try to fit those somewhere. Anyway, so to start off with, this is my offensive rotation. As I said, I like having all of this close together. So I have Greater Flurry of Blows, Flurry of Blows, Chain Penance, Sweep and Takedown, and Spiritual Outburst in my 5 most accessible offensive sort of hotkeys around WASD from 1 to 5. In addition to this, I have like an offensive ring on 6. This would be the Powering, Plasma, or Ephro, whatever it is that I'm currently using on the hunting ground. I have Amulet on Shift 6. This could be the Plasma or the Marud Rebrush. On Control 6, I have Dwarven Ring. On 7, I have Prismatic Ring. On 8, 9, I have Stone Skins and Might Rings to, switch in case you get trapped. Don't often use that myself. I do need to practice that a bit more because I don't, it's kind of out. I'm not really sold on these hotkeys. I think maybe I need to put this on like the mouse or something, but I do have it there. Kind of hard though to reach it for me, so I don't know that this is optimal. I also have the energy ring on F. I just also like to have this one very close and accessible. For when you get in a tricky situation, you can see that your health is going down, but you have a lot of mana still. Then you pop the energy ring just to give you a little bit of breathing room. I have magic wall on G. Probably don't need that one. You could, it's not something I use very much, so you could consider putting something else on G. I also have Y hotkey open. You could probably put something on Y as well. On the T hotkey, I have the Monk Mass Res. Again, I don't use that very much, but I like to have that hotkey for like bosses and stuff in case it's ever needed. Then I have the H, M, and P hotkeys, which respectively stand for like health, man, and potion for me to sort of, have like a mental connection with them. So on H, I have an NPC food for health. This is, the one that you get when you get from the NPC and the houses, right? You get the health, the mana, you've got the skill, the magic level stuff. So I just have a bunch of those. It's only like a 3k health, but it's nice. It's cheap. And if you can see that you're almost dying, you can just pop the H, just give you a little bit of instant health boost. Very, very useful. Highly recommend it. It's not very expensive. Don't you have to use it too often. Similarly, I have the mana one on M. I don't really use this one very much. I use the health one more actually on the monk, but the mana one, in case I start using the energy ring a bit more, is also helpful. And then I obviously have the transcendence potion on P that I use every 10 minutes. And I also have familiar on 0. Those don't need to be too comfortable, as you don't really need to use that very often. Moving on, we have the mouse. So this is my mouse. The mouse has 14 buttons. It has 1 to 12, which I call F1 to F12. Doesn't really have to be that, right? It's just the 1 to 12 mouse buttons. And then in addition to this, I have 2 buttons on top of the mouse, like below the scroll, which I use. So this is what I use. I use the main potion for like survival, USP. In this case, for an EK, this would be like the supreme health potion on F1. I have the main healing spell on F2. This is usually Spirit Mend, although, you can be using like Exuragran here as well. On F3, I have a secondary potion cooldown. Usually this actually for me is also USP on the monk because I use those the most. But if you want to be using like GMPs and GSPs, this is where I would put it. On F4, I don't actually currently have anything hotkeyed, so that's a free one. There's definitely something to put in it. Maybe I'll put like SSA and might rings on it, like maybe SSA on F4 and shift plus F4 be like a might ring or something. Not sure. Probably can use that better than this 8-9 here. Just a suggestion, obviously. On F5, I have the loot hotkey. So this is like a very central hotkey, one of the easiest ones to access for me, which makes it very, very easy to just run around and loot, not have to waste any time looting. On F6, I have strong haste. On F7 and F8, I have focus harmony and focus serenity. Don't have to use those too often, but it's good to have those available to help you get out of traps. And obviously, if you're using Virtue of Harmony with a spiritual outburst wheel, then focus harmony you'll be using every 2 minutes. Then on F9, 10, and 11, I have like the single target rotation. This is basically what I use for bossing. Combine those with like chain penance and sweep and takedown. Obviously, I'm not going to go into single target rotation in this video, but basically on F9, 10, and 11, I have this sort of single. These 3 spells I use for single target rotation, and Mystic Repulse I sometimes use to kill off like a last monster in the box. I'm running towards my next box. I have one monster behind with like 100 health. I'll just kill it off with Mystic Repulse. So you do want to have this hotkey fairly accessible. Then on F12, I have Energy Bomb, Fire Bomb, SD Rune, whatever I currently need for this hunt. I could probably remap that one to something else as well. I don't find this one super, super useful, especially as you see here on F14. I already have an alternative hotkey for like Energy Fire Bomb as well. I could probably just make that one the SD Rune as well, and then I would just free up the F12 as well. Something to consider. And on F13, remember this is my hotkey just below the scroll wheel. I have ranged, etc. Super useful to make this one very, very easy for you to access as well. For me, F13 hotkey, which is the one just below my scroll wheel, is super comfortable to just cast that, as I'm running between boxes to catch all the monsters that I need to. Obviously, the range, etc. for the monk is very, very useful. And here, just with a little highlight, this just shows the idea of like the separation of concerns and sort of groupings. So for like regular standard hunting, I just basically use everything in yellow, right? So this is like my standard hunting rotation is just all the yellow stuff, right? 1 to 5 and F1 to F3. Don't really need to use anything else. Then I have this sort of like utility hunting hotkeys, so the looting and Utani Gran Ho. I obviously use those as well as part of like my regular hunting. Then I have like these focus harmony, focus serenity very close as well to not get confused, and my single target stuff, as already said, in F9, F10, and F11. Obviously, these you can mix and match those, change them around depending on your mouse, on the size of your keyboard. Obviously, all of this will affect it, but as long as you stick to this like separation of concern as idea, then that's fine. And as you can see here, just going about the separation of concerns, right? You have this offensive wheel here, offensive abilities on this left hand, but everything else is not like part of like what you would consider rotation, right? You have the rings, you have the amulets, stuff like this. You do want to have these hotkeys available, but you're not going to be using any of those as part of like your offensive rotation or like regular hunting, right? You just will be casting the spells here for offensive spells for the hunting, and everything else that you might want to use is here. Oh yeah, and I also did forget to mention this here. I also have like all the miscellaneous hotkeys like here. So, you've got your levitate, your antidote, your magic rope, whatever, right? This kind of random stuff that you do need to have somewhere. I usually have those with like control and one of these hotkeys. Like I'll have like magic rope on control plus F1, levitate up and down on control plus F2 and plus 3. This is basically how I've got it set up as well. I don't need to have like super easy access to any of those, but you do need to have those somewhere. Anyway, this pretty much sums up everything I wanted to talk about in this video. Many of you have been asking for this, so I hope it's useful. If you've already watched my Paladin guide, this is not anything revolutionary, right? I just switched basically the Paladin spells for the monk spells. That made it very easy for me to switch from a Paladin to a monk. And anyway, that's what I have for you today, guys. So thanks very much for watching. I hope this has been helpful. If you have any questions, let me know. Be happy to answer. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.